When Sweet Tarts dared to combine sweet and tart, they thought, why stop there? Why not create other exciting and unexpected combinations, like rainbows and ropes, or fruity and gummy, or chewy and more chewy? That's why they created fun treats like Sweet Tarts Twisted Rainbow Ropes, Gummies Fruity Splits, and Chewy Fusions. When you dare to combine, it's sure to blow your mind. Sweet Tarts, dare to combine. Visit sweettartscandy.com to shop now.
The Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Cloak of Invisibility. Together they make the Deathly Hallows. Together they make one Master of Death. The last will and testament of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore.
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all those who live without love.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 19, The Silver Doe. I have Julie.
Hi everybody.
And Mollie.
Hello.
Back with us again for a second straight chapter. Long chapter, and there's a lot going on in it. But before we get there, we do have a great comment that we need to shout out from Sandhya. And Sandhya says, congratulations on the awesome 2024 stats. And this is the top podcast on my Spotify Wrapped.
Yes!
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yay.
She continues, in a tough 2024, as I navigated tech layoffs in the San Francisco Bay Area, this podcast and rediscovering Harry Potter was one of my big stress busters. Highly appreciate the passion and work that goes into it. Thank you. That is truly a really wonderful comment to read and to get. And the idea that we can provide a silly little distraction talking about Harry Potter makes us feel really good.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. Also, thank you for mentioning the Spotify Wrapped. Just for those that missed that, it was also very humbling to see those stats come in. We were streamed in 60 countries just last year alone. In total, we're up to 146, but 60 just last year alone. We were a top 10 podcast, over 1,000 people. And then obviously Sandhya here wonderfully has us as her top podcast. So that's awesome to hear. She does have a comment, though, about Harry Potter. As to Ron's behavior in this chapter, which is chapter 15, The Goblin's Revenge, totally agree he was insufferable. Bad timing, but he definitely needed that time to recalibrate his deadly combo of insecurity and immaturity. Thank you, Sandhya. We will be talking about Ron and said behavior and insecurity and immaturity later in this chapter. So again, thank you so much for that comment. It really does mean a lot to me and to everyone here at the podcast to get comments like that. It's awesome. We do have a chapter to get to. And the chapter takes place with some of Julie's favorite activities. We're not getting there yet. We're not getting to your rant just yet.
Dan, I'm pretty sure you purposely put me on these chapters.
There was no pre-planning at all, I swear. So we do have some of Julie's favorite activities, but we do also get an appearance of a silver white doe in the middle of the forest.
What are they doing in the forest, Dan?
They're having a wonderful time experiencing nature.
Also known as, Mollie?
Camping.
Camping.
I
More
guess you could count
camping.
it as camping, I suppose.
More camping.
I count it as glamping. We'll get there.
Glamping. I didn't know they were drinking mimosas.
Glamping, the only type of camping that I approve of.
We do also get the reappearance of a certain red-headed character, which leads to a very intense scene, and then a reunion of 3 individuals. So, we start off in the Forest of Dean. Harry and Hermione are there. They're kind of on edge a little bit still from their visit to Godric's Hollow, and they're not really able to sleep very well. I think they've had 2 nights now of very little sleep, and they keep hearing noises out in the wilderness, some rumbling of leaves, and maybe some mumbling, talking, whatever have you. So they're a little on edge. They think they might be found out, and they end up leaving to the Forest of Dean. They arrive at the Forest of Dean after they change locations. Now, this sets up, and I am going to hand the podcast over, which might be a dangerous endeavor.
Dan and I are just gonna go.
Yeah, Mollie and I are just gonna grab a drink. We'll be back.
Dan and Mollie are going on a 2-week vacation. I'll be back when I'm done with my rant.
Julie has a wonderful lecture she wants to give on camping in the wizarding world. Julie.
So we've talked about this multiple times. I'm pretty sure the first time I was on this podcast, we probably talked about how I call this book Harry Potter and the Prolonged Camping Trip. There is a lot of camping. I feel vindicated right now. There's been, 5 chapters? I mean, we have more chapters camping than we do with the Dursleys. Camping. I mean, I get it. They had to be somewhere since they couldn't be at Hogwarts, and they had the tent, and it was relatively easy, and if you're hiding out, the forest is a good place for it.
Okay, real question.
Okay.
So, having read these 5 chapters, or these multiple chapters, do you think it has been so heavily camping focused, or has it been enough of a breakup in their actions or their activities to be like, oh, we're not just in a tent the entire time?
I still think it always feels like they're going camping. Like, yeah, other things happen and they go to Godric Hollow, but it consistently feels like they're camping and hiding out and maybe figuring things out. It feels like there's a lot of focus on them camping as they don't progress in the journey.
So I think from a timeline perspective, we're just post-Christmas. So they spent roughly late September, early October, November, December. So 3+ months, let's say. 3+ months actually camping. Personally, I don't feel like it's been mired in oh my gosh, this is a lot of just them sitting in a tent, whatever. However, I will grant you that if this were to take place in the HBO series that's going to come out, I do think the only way to really do this accurately is to kind of draw out the camping over a couple of months. I don't think it does it super justice to just be and scene montage, boom, 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 boom.
I think part of it too is it's not like they're trying to hop and find separate, safe houses or squatting in abandoned homes and sometimes camping. It's just we keep finding abandoned woods. And it's every time that they go to a new one, it's always brought up of the, well, this is where we camped before the Quidditch World Cup. Hermione says, oh, this is where I camped as a kid. And it keeps getting brought up as camping, not we're finding a new safe location. I don't know. It's excessive.
What do you think, Mollie?
I can see where one would feel like
that is a wonderfully diplomatic way to start your answer. Love it.
AKA Mollie disagrees with me, and it's fine. It's fine.
Mollie,
I'll
continue.
sit here with the hatred of camping by myself.
I can see where it would be a lot of camping to someone.
I love this answer already. Continue.
I also don't think I have a hatred for camping. I'm used to I don't know your experience with camping, Julie. I don't know if this is maybe some deep. So to me, I'm just okay, they're out in the wilderness. But anyways, I see it more as a tool that JK probably used to get you in the mindset of what life was like for people in general while Voldemort was in power. That's more how I see it. There's people on the run trying to hide from Voldy and the Snatchers and all of that. So to me, that's where I see where that plays into. So I mean, I think there's a little bit of a break up in terms of, like, you know, they go to Godric's Hollow and everything like that. But I can see both sides to it, where, especially too, like, after watching the movies, there's a lot of camping in the movies.
Well, yeah, so that's what I'm kind of saying, too, is, like, and even the movie kind of, it dwelled on the camping.
Yeah.
But even that kind of rushed by it.
Yeah.
Because it did almost do, like, a little montage where it's, like,
Right.
scene and scene and scene and scene.
Right.
I think it also, like, ends up bothering me just because when you're on the run, you don't want to establish any type of pattern, typically, because then you're easy to follow. So if someone realizes that they're going from forest to forest to forest, like, eventually you just enchant forests, or you have Death Eaters in forests, or whatever. And so it also feels a little off-brand, I guess, of the trio to just be like, all right, like, let's not change it up at all.
Yeah, I could see that point. For sure.
Well, you best know that our poll for this episode is going to be, has the camping been too much?
I also think, too, like, in a way, for me, though, when you read how miserable it sounds to be camping, well, you also kind of feel miserable, and you're like, I am ready for this.
But it also could have been done in the same way of them, like, squatting in an abandoned building where there isn't, like, heat or running water.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will give you that. It's easy to camp in early October.
Right.
Not so much in January, where you're getting the wind and the sleet or snow and whatever you get in Britain as you're bouncing around Britain. That's a lot tougher. As they've mentioned, like, hey, it's cold, we're uncomfortable, which, again, you're wizards, you could probably figure out some way around that. You probably should be able to.
I'm very confused by that.
Fair. That's a fair criticism.
Like, Harry talks about how he puts on, like, every sweater that he owns, and I'm like, there's
a
no
little,
spell to have your sweater warm?
The best they
I
have...
bet you he used Osteo sweater.
Probably. Probably. It's one of 3 spells that he knows.
I'm telling you what. If I'm sitting on the couch and I'm cold, I don't want to get up. But yeah, all they have is, like, Hermione's little blue flame in a jar. I'm like, that's the best you got?
Yeah.
But I always questioned, like, I know you're talking to Dumbledore in Book 6 about, like, all of these horcruxes. Why don't you talk to Slughorn about how he avoided Death Eaters for so long, bouncing from not even just house to house, like, nice house to nice house with all the creature comforts, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, too, though, like, if you look back on, like, previous wars, like, in history, you know, people are marching from place to place and, you know, in the cold. And, like, I randomly just thought of Band of Brothers, you know, when they're in the winter in these trenches and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's somewhat of, like, you could make a correlation, too.
Well, I like that, where it does show you the complications of wartime, and they are wanted, and not just wanted, they're, like, the most wanted. Mm-hmm. But it also shows you how isolated they are, and I think Ron shows you a little bit when he comes back, like, how isolated you are. You don't really know what's going on outside of this little tent. Mm-hmm. And there is stuff going on. Like, people are still living their lives, and people are still suffering and dying under the regime while we're sitting here in a tent. Granted, that's not Harry's, like, intention. He wants to go do stuff. He just doesn't have that direction yet, which we've talked about. Is that enough camping talk? Or
we can move on.
Okay, we can move on. Okay.
We can move on.
All right, so we have Harry unable to sleep in said tent that he's camping in.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep, you're welcome. And he decides to take over the watch, even though he's just running on adrenaline at this point, I guess, or anxiety, maybe more like. So he takes the watch, and he's dozing off a little bit. He's trying to focus on other things, and then all of a sudden, he sees a silver white doe come out of the darkness and approach him. And he can't explain why, but he feels as if he had been waiting for this. And he doesn't sense danger. He has an innate instinct that's like, I can't explain it, but I'm safe. As long as I'm with the glowing white visage of a doe, I'm okay. And he doesn't think to wake up Hermione.
Because Harry's instincts are always reliable.
They are.
And safe.
In fairness, I think that is his one overwhelming good quality. He usually is dead on with his instincts. It's other stuff, like if he actually has time to think something out, that's where he usually goes wrong. His instincts are usually pretty good. So he follows him. He trusts his... And he says overwhelming. It's an overwhelming instinct, which I do have questions about. He gets to the point where he follows this doe for a while into the woods. And a question starts to burn inside him. But as he's about to ask that question, the doe vanishes. When the doe vanishes, fear becomes his primary feeling. And he thought with the doe, he was safe. Now without the doe, he's now stuck in the darkness in the middle of the woods. And it's pitch black. And it's now hard. All of a sudden, he could be attacked from any direction. And all kinds of danger is about. Let's focus on the doe for a second, because I know both of you ladies have thoughts on the doe. I'll pose this question. Do you think the doe, silver white, you could presume Patronus? Mm-hmm. And we know the innate effects of said Patronus. Its intent is to make you feel warm and generally happy and safe. So, is it his innate instinct? Or is it just a side effect of being in the presence of a Patronus?
Ooh, I didn't even think about that.
A little column A, little column B.
All right.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the part of him that, like, it's an innate feeling, he doesn't necessarily, like, make the connection as to why he feels so comfortable with it, but I would assume that the reason that a Patronus was also used is because it gives you that comforting, like, feeling, which also, like, terrifying to think that you could, like, also use that as, like, a major trap. Like, imagine being a Death Eater and just being like, hey, here's this little warm fuzzy that's just going to carry you right out to where you die.
That's true. However, we do note that Umbridge, when she was using her Patronus in the courtroom, was not nearly as bright, as powerful, as warm as when Harry cast his. And I wonder if that is based on the intent of the person casting the charm. Mm-hmm. So Umbridge's intent there was, protect me, harm someone else. It was a little bit more nefarious of a purpose. Whereas Harry's generally is to protect someone, whether it's himself or protect someone else from harm and from danger. Therefore, his Patronus is powerful. So this one, I guess, do you think there's a difference in types of Patronuses or strengths of Patronus, qualities?
I mean, I'm sure there is somewhat, like, of an intent with that. I think there's always some kind of intent with magic, right? I also gotta wonder, too, if it has to do with, like, the spellcaster's ability. You know? Like, maybe Umbridge isn't that great with Patronuses because she's not a very warm, happy, fuzzy person.
It's fair.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to tap into that, like, Harry pretty much had his whole third year of schooling of trying to figure out what he needs to tap into to make it strong. And one of the biggest tests of his Patronus was, what was it, like 100 Dementors, like, coming in. So, like, while you're under duress trying to find what that happy moment is, like, imagine being up against 100 and then you're up against one. You're not going to be like, all right, let me remember when I found a penny on the sidewalk. You're going to, whatever that strong memory was, like, you're always going to connect to that. So I think Umbridge's is more of a, like, she can do it. She just doesn't have anything that's strong enough to make it as powerful.
Her happy memory is, remember that time that I tortured Harry Potter?
Sure. You're joking, but I think you might be correct.
No,
I think you might be right.
I mean, I'm half joking, I'm half being serious.
But so if that's true, let's assume that's true, because very good likelihood it is. Does that matter? Because your happiest memory is hurting someone else.
But Umbridge also purposely cast her Patronus to protect her and not the other person in the room.
Right.
So it could also be said that she's not looking for a strong memory. She's just looking for something that keeps
Gets
her
the job
safe.
done.
Because if Harry cast his Patronus in there, it would protect everyone in the room,
Right.
which is not what Umbridge would want.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just, so I guess I kind of sidetracked. I know you guys had opinions on the dough. I just kind of sidetracked that completely. I have one
Threw
more.
us off our tracks.
I have one more question, and then I'll let you two go crazy with the Silver Doe. But the only question I have is this burning question inside him. I was fully expecting, because again, there are obviously details in this book that I lapse and don't remember as well. Mm-hmm. So when he says a question burns inside him, I was expecting the question to actually be said. He doesn't. He lets it drop. And we don't get the actual question that was burning inside him. I'm just going to throw out a potential guess, given he knows his Patronus is a stag, his father's Patronus was a stag, and he's seeing a doe. Is the question that burns inside him, are you Lily? From Lily, by Lily, whatever. Could
be like, who are you? Or it honestly could even be, the reason we don't hear the question could also be the, have you guys ever had the experience where it's like, you know that you have a question you want to ask someone, and then you're like, the question was something. Like, where you just have that feeling that you need to ask someone, like, something specific. And
I'm sure that happens here, because he says fear immediately replaces whatever else he was feeling.
Yeah, so it could be that, like, that, you know, warmth from the Patronus is making him go, oh, wait, I have to ask you. And then once the Patronus goes away and that fear hits in, like, you're thinking about the fact that you're in pitch black darkness in the middle of the woods because you're camping. And how you can be attacked from any angle and not be able to see it. So it's like, you're not necessarily, like, trying to figure out what that question was, and that question is no longer important.
Those are my two thoughts on the doe. You guys can go ahead with your thoughts on Harry following a doe into pitch black darkness. Go ahead.
I mean...
Same.
Yeah. I generally come to Harry's aid with a lot of things. But just with what is going on and what he's doing and who's out there, why? Why would you just go and follow something? And I mean, I get that he has, like, his instincts and they're generally right, but...
He considers it. He thinks it could be a trap. He just ignores that completely.
Yeah.
Like, it comes to him. He thinks about it.
Because Harry's dumb.
It's stupid. I've always been like, you know what, Harry, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but this is kind of dumb.
I rarely give Harry the benefit of the doubt, and I'm not going to
Rarely
do it now.
is overestimated.
I think I've maybe taken Harry's side once in all the episodes that I've been on this podcast. And it's just the fact that he even has the thought of, like, this could be a trap. And it's like, you're in the situation, you recognize the danger, and then you get something that gives you, like, a warm fuzzy, and after 7 years in the magical world, like, there's no part of you that's like, wow, this is sus. Like, maybe I shouldn't follow it. Or follow it, but shout out to Hermione first. Like,
yeah.
Dumb. Dumb.
Also, just thinking about this, the doe approached the tent.
Right.
Which even more terrifying, because it now shows that all of your defenses that have been working for so long
clearly don't apply to at least this ghostly white, silver, or whatever it is, doe. The silver white doe doesn't. Your magical enchantments and protections don't apply to it.
Right.
So, interesting.
Yes.
After fear envelops him, he does shine Hermione's wand up to get some light in the distance, and he notices that he's beside a pond and notices that there's something gleaming under the ice. He goes to investigate and finds the sword of Godric Gryffindor is underneath the ice in the water. This is just a Julie episode, I'm telling you what.
I feel personally attacked by your outline this episode, Dan.
He tries. Accio sword.
While specifically saying he didn't think it would work.
Okay. In fairness to Harry Potter.
Harry is just real dumb here because he goes for the Accio sword, goes, I didn't think it would work, and then goes, well, it's supposed to... Last time it's because I asked for help. And then he looks down at the water and says, help! Harry, you are a wizard!
I don't have a problem with him trying the easy answer first. Especially confronted with what ultimately he has to do to try to get this thing. I don't want to do that. I'm trying the easy answer first.
He didn't even try to break the ice first.
It's a sword. If you call it, I'm sure it would just break through them. I don't know that I'm killing Harry for this. He does come to the idea that what is needed to get the sword is daring, nerve, and chivalry, like a true Gryffindor.
I take issue with that.
The Gryffindor takes issue with the Gryffindor qualities?
Not with the Gryffindor qualities. I take issue with the fact that, like, Harry has this correct, like, idea of you need to show the daring and the nerve and the chivalry in order to get this sword that's supposedly here because you need help. Like, it just seems off to me that it's like, hey, desperate times are ahead and you need help. But first, can you complete these 3 tasks to make sure that you're worthy of help? It bothers me.
Well, I don't, that makes it sound like it's literally, I must do X, and then I must do Y, and then I must do Z.
It is. The sword is asking you to prove that you have these Gryffindor qualities.
By doing one thing. Like, you just have to do one thing.
By risking your life when you're already in a life-risking situation.
I do like how he's like, how does chivalry play into this? That I'm not asking Hermione to do it for me?
Like I ask her to do everything else? Wow, I'm real triggered this episode.
I mean, to me, all of this says it's a trap. Like, let's follow this fuzzy little white happy thing to a place where there's a sword underneath the ice. And what is Harry's always go-to reactions is bravery and sometimes
being dumb,
stupidity, to save something or to get something. Like, it reminds me of, all right, let's go to book 5 and what happens to Sirius and when,
Again, triggering. What is happening this episode?
So to recap really briefly, your issues with Harry so far are following the Doe into the wilderness without Hermione, and then the idea that the sword is underneath the water and he used 2 very simple ways to try to get it before deciding, like, no, I should do something pretty dangerous to go get it.
Yeah.
Without, again, calling for Hermione to at least be backup of some sort. To be clear, I don't fully agree with either critiques of Harry. That being said, there might be something that happens later in this chapter where I change my tune. But before that, I do have a question for you both. This is a Sword of Godric Gryffindor. What happens? Just throwing it out there. Just throwing a dart at a dartboard. What happens if, like, some dude in Brighton who happens to be a Gryffindor is getting, like, mugged by Death Eaters or Snatchers, or he's a really prominent wizard and happens to be being attacked by Voldy himself? The sword just doesn't appear to him? Like, what happens if, like, Harry's reaching for this thing and then it just blinks out of existence?
Well, the real question is that guy doing something brave?
Yes, exactly. Is he showing his nerve?
Right.
Okay, what if
he being chivalrous? See? Dumb. This is dumb.
What if his wife is being attacked, he jumps in between, and duels multiple Death Eaters, but loses his wand and he needs a weapon?
But at the same time, it would have to be like a priority thing. Like, the sword, I would assume, realizes that Harry's need would be more dire because Harry is able to get rid of a horcrux.
Okay, I'll back it up. What if it's just sitting in Snape's office and just blinks out of existence? Like, do you think, like, in the entire time Dumbledore has been, like, headmaster and he's just sitting at his office and he just hears a clink, And he just looks behind, sword gone. And then he's just, whatever, I'll have my tea. Blink, it's back.
I think my own personal thoughts on it is I don't necessarily know that the sword is readily available to all Gryffindors. Because when Harry first pulls it from the sorting hat, it's kind of a like, whoa, look at this ancient artifact that no one's seen in a millennia. And so I don't think that it's necessarily like any Gryffindor could be like, man, I could use some help. I need that. So, like, I think
I'm not saying, like, I need, like, to steal a biscuit and I'm getting run down from, like...
No, but I think it's more of a...
I'm thinking more mortal danger here.
It's
with a sword in I'm in trouble here. The biscuit needs butter. I need mortal peril. The sword appears and you just butter the biscuit with the sword.
I was buttering the biscuit for my wife.
Chivalrous! Done!
And she was angry at me, so it took nerve.
I have nerve to put butter on instead of jelly.
That's what I'm saying!
But when we look at the times that we've seen and will see the sort of Godric Gryffindor throughout the series, like... It's only in, not even life or death situations, but in the, like, universal balance type situations. Like, every time we see it, it's to help get rid of a horcrux.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, is there in-between times, which I guess then gets into a dark stance of, like, it does blink out of existence for a minute when Dumbledore's just sitting there and he's, like, looking at it like... Well, sword just disappeared. Someone's getting attacked.
But that's what I'm saying, is I think that it's... The sword has just been gone.
Just in, like,
that it's
no
essentially
man's land?
been almost like, you know, a dinosaur fossil. Like, it's somewhere, and when it knew that it was needed to help, you know, keep the universal balance, then it appeared for Harry. And now it's...
So you don't think it's been in Dumbledore's possession since that incident in the Chamber of Secrets?
No, I think it has since then, but I think that it's only come out because of the huge threat of Voldemort and the Horcruxes. And it felt the, like, extreme, almost dire need. It didn't come out at some point during the First Wizarding War because it somehow has a magical sense that Dumbledore would be able to take down Grindy. And when you have these magical objects that seem to also have some level of personification to them almost, that there's some level of we are only coming when it's needed, not to butter a biscuit, but
I don't know. Mollie's argument was quite convincing. I am sold, okay?
But purely used to, like, keep the natural balance and order in line.
I like the butter the biscuit. I've never been more sold on an argument.
Oh, goodness.
Regardless, Harry does decide that he needs to go and get this sword. So he cracks the ice, and after a little while of being like, trying to steel his courage about, like, this is going to be awful. Like, this is going to be a really rough experience. And after he dwells on it, he's like, all right, I got to do it. And he just dives in the water. At this point, as he's reaching for the sword, the chain on the locket, which he's still wearing, tightens around his neck, and he starts to struggle to breathe. This, ladies, this is where I have an issue with not the wisest decision he has made by wearing the locket as he's going off to get the thing he thinks can destroy said locket.
Although, wow, I'm about to...
Are you about to defend him on this? Julie, what? How are you defending him on this?
Purely because I understand the idea of you don't want to necessarily leave the Horcrux behind where someone
You
can
agree,
swipe it.
Mollie? She's shaking her head. You can't see it, but I'm flabbergasted.
That's the only like support I will give him in this is I get that since you don't have Hermione with you, you don't necessarily want to just leave the horcrux sitting there, especially when you just saw this Patronus that you don't know who cast it, you don't know who's there, you already felt that fear and slightly being threatened. You don't want to just leave it there for a Death Eater to come by and swipe the locket.
And I will say this. He's not really thinking right now, clearly. Like, he's going off of emotion. So I doubt he's going to be like, you know what? This horcrux, I'm going to leave it here so that,
He took off every other bit of his clothing other than, like, his underwear.
I also think, too, it's like horcruxes, they want the worst for you, right?
What I'm hearing is he might, but not certainly, will be attacked by following the doe. He might, but not certainly, will be in danger by just going into some really cold water to go get a sword. But he knows what that locket can do. He knows it affects his magic. It knows it affects his mentality, his personality, his emotions. Like, he knows he's been unable to perform magic with it on his neck. You're going to get the Sword of Gryffindor, and you haven't been attacked already. He does mention that. He's like, if I was going to get attacked, I would have been, because I've been out in the open. There's been plenty of opportunities to get ambushed. Have not. There's no one here. So put it down and go get the sword underneath the water.
I mean, I agree he should have put it down, but I see why that didn't necessarily take precedent in his decision.
So the one thing I have an issue with Harry in this chapter, you guys don't. And the two things you have an issue with Harry doing the chapter, I don't. Weird. Literature's great.
Right?
So with that, we will take a short break before we get to what happens next. And we will be back with part 2. So enjoy the break sound, and we'll be right back. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're gonna love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Dobby has no master. Dobby is a free elf.
All right, so we are back. We start off with a return of a character who starts off with, "Are you mental?" Ron has returned. And we learned that he is the one that ended up pulling Harry out of the water, removing the locket from Harry's neck, and immediately questions why Harry didn't remove the locket first. Which is a really clever comment from Ron, being like, dude, come on. Like, common sense. What are you doing? But then, immediately after Ron's relatively clever comment, he goes, oh yeah, I forgot your Patronus was a stag. Really, dude? Like, you
spent a lot of time.
You spent a lot of time with this guy,
Right.
and he's like, "Oh, right. The horns, the antlers, right? Yours has those. Got it. Okay, Ron." After Ron's heroic feat, Harry suggests that Ron is the one to destroy the Horcrux. His reasoning is Ron got the sword out of the pond, therefore it is supposed to be him. And he knows this because if there's one piece of wisdom that Dumbledore has imparted on Harry that has apparently stuck, it's the incalculable power of certain acts. Some things just mean a little bit more. And so he is certain that because the events went this way, and Ron is the Gryffindor that ended up pulling Gryffindor's sword out of the pond, he's got to be the one to use it. Harry also comes to the realization, like, hey, I'll just open the horcrux. It'll be easy. I'll use parcel tongue, and you could just stab it real quick. It's the answer that he thinks he always knew, but Nagini, the encounter with Nagini, made him realize it, like, fully. Which makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
That all of the Order members could not figure out for the life of them how to open up this locket. That creature could not figure out for the life of them how to open up this locket. And he's always like, well, what can I do that they can't? What can I do that they can't? So I'm sure the answer has been, like, floating around his head. But it wouldn't have done him any good to do it, because what are you going to do once it opens?
Yeah.
So this makes sense. I'm cool with it. Right?
Yeah.
Ron, however, not cool with it, protests and says it affects him worse than the others.
Whatever.
He acknowledges, look, I thought the stuff anyway. I maybe would have said the stuff anyway. It's just, it's a lot worse with me than it seems to be with you two. You seem unconvinced, Julie.
Yeah, well, so we talked about this prepping for recording, but there is a Instagram account that I follow. It's frequently on our stories because I'm constantly sending his reels to Jen. Shout out to prof.jw on Instagram. He brings up that Ron doesn't deserve any type of sympathy for the way that he acts, because he's also coming from a place of such privilege. He never really faces any type of hardship. Like, Harry was abused by the Dursleys. Harry, I mean, we've read 7 books of hardship from Harry. Hermione has to deal with the inherent, like, racism of being a mudblood, and Ron hasn't had that hardship. Like, his hardships are like, my family's not rich, my friend's more popular than me. Like, what can we name that was an actual hardship on Ron? And when you haven't faced any level of hardship, anything that slightly doesn't go your way is catastrophic. So him not being more popular than Harry is catastrophic to him. Hermione not being madly in love with him is catastrophic to him. Like, any of his siblings getting more attention is catastrophic to him. Not because it's actually catastrophic, but because he hasn't faced any level of hardship. And now he's coming in that, think of all of the things that the horcrux could pull out of Harry to torment him with him, that he could sling at any of his friends, and he doesn't. He said worst to them in Order of the Phoenix when he felt slighted by them. Meanwhile, Ron, it goes on him, and he verbally attacks his friends and says nasty things and then abandons them? Like, no, I'm sorry, I don't care. Whatever, Ron.
Finishes it with, I don't care. Wow. Forget your traumas and your issues that...
But okay. What traumas has Ron had?
Well, okay. I will qualify it with this. We are not in Ron's shoes. So we don't know... Every person's trauma is their own, and it's a real trauma. We shouldn't be measuring traumas with people just because it's their own personal struggle.
Yeah.
So we don't know how Ron really deals with having the brothers that he has, who are all accomplished in their own right. And Ginny is well on her way to being super talented and is the only girl of the family who does get fawned on a lot. His best friend is the most famous person in the world, if at the very least in Britain. At the very least, we can agree, the most famous person in Britain by, like, a long way. And, you know, Hermione is the brightest witch of her age. Like, I'm not going to pretend it's not hard to be Ron at times. We've been hard on Ron on this podcast for a bunch of different reasons. I'm not going to pretend it's not hard to be Ron. I do agree with you, though, how he's getting a true dose of perspective of what life can actually be, and the hardships that other people are having to struggle through. And, you know, it does maybe recontextualize some of the struggles that you perceive you are having. And I think, you know, that's why you literally have the idiom of, like, walk a mile in someone else's shoes and see how their life is like. And maybe you'll think differently about your own. And, you know, I think that's very true with what Ron's experiencing of, like, oh, I thought I had a rough life at the Burrow because it's kind of a shabby house and it might not be the best of everything, but now I'm living in a tent out in the wilderness and I don't have a good meal. I don't have warmth. I don't have a lot of that. I don't have the security of knowing that my family is okay. And you know, he's getting a perspective. I get it. And with Ron being as insecure as he is, and we'll see some of those insecurities here pop up in a second, it can be hard facing those, especially with someone else present. It's hard enough to face those insecurities yourself in your room late at night when they're running through your head and keeping you up until 3 a.m., let alone with a person you know, a best friend, a brother-like figure who's witnessing all of your greatest insecurities.
The crazy part is, though, is that it's not like Ron is quiet about his insecurities. Like, even in all the way in book 1, like when they're looking in the mirror, like Ron's
his
is
desires.
that his deepest desire is to get more attention and to be like the best of his siblings. Like Harry's is versus Harry's, which is just to have a family. Like looking at those two desires, like
it's hard. It's hard because when you do go through traumas, real world stuff, it's hard because then you it's easier to look at people that haven't maybe gone through such a drastic situation and judge. But I can also say too, you know, I'm sure it's not easy for Ron to deal with some of the things that he has gone through, because if you think about it, he goes to school and he has somebody like Malfoy who's making fun of his family for not having enough. Like, that's traumatic when you're younger, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me throw this at you too. Like, I was very, very hard on Ron for what he said to Harry when he did leave the trio. I was brutal, and I stand by that.
Yeah.
That being said, like, the thing he said to Harry about, like, your parents are dead, so what do you have to worry about? Harsh, uncalled for, not appropriate at any level. That being said, to somewhat defend Ron, the idea that he can lose his brothers, lose his sister, lose his mom and dad is a horrifying prospect to him. Yeah. So some of the things that the locket is probably showing him in his dreams or nightmares or whatever you want to call them is his parents probably dying in this war, and that terrifies him, as it probably should, because I don't think anybody loves that idea. So, while he was wrong to blast Harry with inappropriate accusations, it's coming from a real place, which I don't really fault him for.
Which again, though, this is the first time that, like, yes, he has faced certain levels of trauma, like obviously being bullied in school and being told that your family doesn't like have enough and is less than. Like, I'm not saying that that's nothing, but when you compare that to, and again, like, there's no actual way to compare trauma.
Everybody feels
because
their
everyone
own
feels differently for different things. But like when you're comparing the trio and then you have Ron going like, oh, it affects me so much way worse. It's like, how bad is that your insecurities, your jealousy, because most of the insecurities that we see are more jealousy than anything else. He's jealous that his siblings have more, call it notoriety. He's jealous that Hermione might not have feelings for him. He's jealous that, you know, in Goblet of Fire, you did that without me? Oh, you had to take more? You had to get into the Triwizard Tournament? And it's like, when that's, like, that affects you more than Harry, who has watched his parents die. Then the closest thing he had to a father die. He watched one of his friends die right in front of him. Every year he has a threat on his life. And it's like, and your jealousy is like, the horcrux can pull more on that than all of the death, destruction, the hardship. Like, that's why Ron doesn't really get a ton of, like, I don't know, like, he doesn't get a pat on the back for coming or even for, like, saving Harry in this instant. Like, it's more irritating to then have Ron go when Harry, again, goes, you should kill the horcrux. And yes, there's the logic behind it of, since Ron pulled the sword out, he's the one that should be doing it. But it's, again, Harry and Hermione constantly do it where they find ways to give Ron that little extra pat on the back. And it's another, like, bro, you're back. You kill the horcrux. This one's yours. You got this. Whether or not there's the magical logic behind it. Because one could also argue that Harry is the strongest connection to Voldemort. Maybe Harry should be the one killing all the horcruxes.
So, ultimately, the locket does get opened. Harry opens the locket up, and it reveals a blinking, living eye revealed behind the windows of the locket. And the eye is dark and handsome, as Tom Riddle's used to be. And the locket speaks. And I'm going to paraphrase what the locket says, but I've seen your heart, and it is mine. I've seen your dreams, your fears. All you desire is possible. All you dread is also possible. Least loved by your mother who craved a daughter. Least loved by the girl who prefers your friend. Eternally overshadowed. That's not all the locket does. The locket then actually produces images. It produces Harry and Hermione. First is like these like floating heads, and then eventually you get like full body Harry and Hermione. And at this point the locket burns like white hot, and Harry has to release the locket. And the Harry and Hermione actually speak with Voldy's voice. And Voldy Harry says, why return? We were better, happier without you. Laughed at your stupidity, at your cowardice. And then Voldy Hermione says, who could look at you beside Harry Potter? What have you ever done compared to the chosen one? Then it goes a step further, and the visions of Harry and Hermione actually embrace passionately in front of Ron. And this actually seems to set him off, and he ends up taking a swing with the sword. Harry almost thinks it's at him, but he does end up shattering the locket. How about that for a sequence?
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's intense.
Yeah.
I made the mention earlier of Ron facing his insecurities, but I mean, like, this is a lot to face. I mean, we joked about the daring and the nerve and the chivalry before, but I feel like it takes a whole other level of courage to be able to literally look all of your deepest, darkest thoughts right in the face, coming out of your two closest people, like even probably closer than your family, really,
Mm-hmm.
and your deepest, darkest thoughts are coming from them at you, and they're attacking you with it. That's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that is really hard to have to face and confront.
Whatever. I'm over it.
Coach.
I'm not diving back into it. I just went on a super long tangent, and the only thing that's going to happen is I'm going to repeat everything. So, whatever. I'm over it.
I just came with this wonderful, emotional soliloquy of Ron's emotions and how hard this moment must have been. And Ron's like, Ron's struggling with it, and Julie's just like, meh, don't care.
I'm over it. Come on, Mollie.
We'll see if Mollie, the Hufflepuff, is a little bit more empathetic.
I feel for Ron. I get it. Like, it's hard, man.
But also over it.
I was going to say, she's sounding like she's over it.
In certain ways, ways, yeah, I am over it, you know. It's hard to hear sometimes Ron whine about him being not the best and, you know, Harry getting all this attention, and you're like, really, man? Like,
he has attention because his parents died.
Exactly. You know, but at the same time too, like, I can have empathy for Ron. Ron has a lot of love in his family. That's one of the reasons why I love the Weasleys in general. There's a lot of love going on in there. But I can also see where it would be really hard to grow up and feel like you're kind of like that child kicked aside and you're just trying to get attention from your parents while your other siblings are like, oh, you're the best, you're the greatest, you know? So I think it is kind of cool to see Ron kind of get a little bit of a redemption in terms of being able to face his fears and look inside himself and look at those things that have hurt him and kind of conquer them in a way. That's kind of how I see it. So at the same time too, it's kind of like, oh, okay, Ron, like, give it a rest. It's a little bit of both, you know?
So not a lot of love for Ron here. Sensing that, getting those vibes. So let me turn it around.
No, I did say, hey, I did say that I have empathy and I feel for him. And I think it is pretty cool that he was able to step up and, you know, face his fears, basically.
So what if Harry or Hermione switched places with Ron in this moment? What if the locket focused on one of them instead? What do you think would they see? What do you think? How do you think they would deal with it?
I think Hermione, you might see, like, almost similar to what you saw when she was taking her exams, where it was like McGonagall was like, you have failed and you have failed at everything. Maybe you would see that. I'm not 100% sure though, like, does this horcrux in general, like, attack insecurities? What is...
I would assume so, because it would attack your insecurities so that you aren't strong enough to attack it.
Yeah.
Well, it specifically says, I've seen your heart, I've seen your dreams, I've seen your desires, I've seen your dread. So, I mean, I guess the idea, because it literally hangs next to your heart.
Right.
So it knows you inside and out.
Right.
And obviously it would focus more on the negativity part.
Yeah, I wonder if Hermione's would even go a step further of, like, outside of the, like, you know, with the exams of McGonagall telling her she failed, but of a, like, seeing her friends have died, or seeing that her parents, like, that the memory charm didn't work, and so now they've been captured, and it's, like, the very, like, real ways that she can fail, not just failing an exam, but, like, since Hermione's biggest fear is essentially failing, that if it's seeing that because she failed, like, Harry has died, or because she's failed, her parents' memory charm went off and they've been captured and tortured. And I feel like that is more what we'd see from Hermione.
An evolution of the I'm not good enough.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to. Yeah.
And I would say Harry's would almost be Voldemort saying we're one and the same. I think that's the thing that would get Harry the most, is playing up on that connection between him and Voldy and making it more of a, like, we are one.
Ooh.
Okay.
Versus, because when you think of what Harry's, like, what does Harry have left to fear? You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
He's not necessarily gonna, like, he might fear failing, but, like, after 7 years of all of this, like, I don't think that what would come out of the locket is necessarily that everyone dies. It would be playing on either there's a strong connection and him and Voldy are one in the same, or back in book 5, book 6, where he realizes that everyone keeps dying to protect him. And I think it would play up on that, of the sacrifice of others mixed with a, like, they sacrifice themselves for you and you're essentially Voldemort. You're one and the same. There's a strong connection. Why else would you have this mental link? Why else would you both have similar wands? Why else, you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I see it.
Yeah, I like that.
So I completely agree with you on on both Hermione and Harry's. The evolution of the I'm not good enough for Hermione, I think, would definitely take hold. Fear of her parents. For Harry, I also agree that what else does he have to lose at this point? I could see him facing this horcrux and being like, I've seen this before. I've dealt with this before, and just stabs it. Then I thought about it. And then I thought about it, and I was like, there is still a lot for him to lose. Like, there is Ron. There is Hermione. There's Ginny. There's a lot of people he still cares about and has in this game. What has irritated him and chipped him the most while he's been on this elongated camping trip? It's the idea that he's lost. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's a poor leader. He can't get them to the finish line. He can't accomplish this. That's what's really grated on him. He's failing people that are looking to him as being the answer.
Dumbledore comes out of the locket and tells him that he's a failure because he couldn't piece it together.
Yeah, if he's a messenger, I could buy that. Yeah. I could buy him as a messenger for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The counter question that I have for you, Dan.
Question to my question.
Who has the easiest and hardest time destroying the Horcrux when they face their fears?
My gut reaction was Ron. I think
has the easiest or hardest?
Has the hardest. My gut reaction was Ron, and my easiest would have been Harry. If I give it more thought, and if we want to have a real discussion about it, Hermione being the hardest, I think, is a real option.
I think Hermione has the hardest. Ron has the easiest.
Ooh.
The reason I say Ron has the easiest is Ron has such a temper when he's faced with his insecurities that I think
it works for him.
Yes, I think Ron destroying the Horcrux in this instance wasn't a like, oh, right, I gotta destroy this thing. I think it was a reaction. Yeah, it was a reaction. I agree. He was so angry that all of these insecurities are coming up, and it's him lashing out. So I think it's easiest for him, hardest for Hermione, because we see Hermione crumple under, like, intense pressure in the past.
Ditto. Honestly.
Easiest for Ron, hardest for Hermione?
Yeah. My initial reaction would probably be like, oh, it's the hardest for Harry, and, you know, I think he makes some pretty good points with that.
It's pretty easy to come to a quick conclusion.
Right.
And be like, oh, it's definitely this person or definitely that person. Right. And then you get into it a little bit more, and you're like, oh, these qualities of these individuals do come into play a little bit, and Ron does have some of the more aggressive natures of a Gryffindor. Whereas Hermione might have some more reflective nature of, like, maybe a Ravenclaw side.
Yeah.
Where some of these bad thoughts get into your head and you can't get them out because they're just stuck in your head all of a sudden. You know? I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
We do get the aftermath of this event in this chapter. And Ron falls to his knees after destroying the Horcrux. And he's been through it just in this. I don't know how long this all takes. I'm imagining just like a minute or two, like all of this. But he falls to his knees, and this is, I think, a great moment from Harry, because Harry just witnessed his best friend's, like, all of his darkest thoughts put out on Front Street, and he knows it's awkward. He knows, like, oh man, like, there's a lot here. I'm involved in it a couple of times. So he's like, okay, this might be one of the more perfect examples of Harry growing as an individual and knowing the right thing to say at the right time. He just goes over to Ron, puts a hand on him, and says, Hermione's been crying for days after you left, for weeks. It was only, and then he says, it was only now that Harry himself realized just how much Ron's absence had actually cost them in their pursuit of Horcruxes or the sword or whatever, which we can get into that in a second. But Harry continues with, you know, Hermione is like my sister. I love her like a sister, and I reckon she feels the same about me. Ron just says, I'm sorry I left. And Harry says, you made up for it, which we can get into. Harry says, getting the sword, finishing the Horcrux, saving me. Ron says, that makes me sound a lot cooler than I was. And Harry says, that always sounds cooler than it really was. I've been trying to tell you that 4 years. And they hug.
It's a lovely growing moment.
It's a bro moment.
Yeah.
They have experienced and shared something. It's a bro moment. The friendship has deepened.
I'm just picturing like the hand,
the bro hug and the
bro
the
hug.
handshake that you slowly bring into the hug.
Yeah.
the one arm around. Yep, 100%. Julie seems still unmoved.
Yeah, well, it's like where Ron's like, wow, that makes me sound way cooler than I was. And Harry's like, yeah, hello, I've only been telling you this the entire time we've been friends, that none of this is cool. Like, hi, welcome to trauma.
So what do you two think Ron being away? I've kind of asked this question a couple of times throughout their events of like going to Godric's Hollow. How do you think Ron being there would have changed those events? How do you think Ron doing this or that would have changed things? So I'm asking you now. He says Ron has cost them by not being there. How?
I mean,
I would like to remind everybody, Mollie is a defender of the Weasleys. Loves the Weasleys. Ron is a member of the Weasley family.
I love Ron.
It's okay, Mollie.
It's kind of a good thing that he wasn't there, in all honesty, because I think it would have kind of... He would have been a liability.
Oh, wow. Wow.
It's okay. Take a deep, calming breath, Mollie.
I feel like Mollie is coming to grips with a lot of stuff. Okay.
I'm having a moment here, guys.
Mollie, you know what my follow-up question is going to be. How so? How is he a liability?
With Godric's Hollow and everything, I feel like he just would have gotten in the way. He would have been that extra piece that Hermione had to help, and
he's the hostage.
Yeah.
Well, maybe getting in the way might have actually helped them at Godric's Hollow. Him being like, hey, this is weird. Hey, this is fishy. Hey, can we, like, he's the common sense guy. Because Hermione thinks 20 steps ahead, and Harry
doesn't think at all.
Harry gets caught up in, like, the actual moment.
Yeah.
So you need that third view of the situation of being like, this is not right.
Yeah.
What is going on here? And like Hermione was downstairs and eventually got up there. I think Ron would be right at that door with an extendable ear being like, I want to hear what she says. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that is a good point.
And then he just hears a bunch of hissing and he's like, okay, this is weird, and then just goes in. You know?
Maybe, I mean, that's a good point. Maybe Ron would have been redemptive in some sort of way in terms of helping out and saving, but I don't know why I'm just like he would have been a liability. I can't put my finger on it, but I just feel that way, that like maybe it was the good thing he wasn't there.
I'll buy that.
And moving on, I guess.
I also just want to add, he's also cost them a lot of their like mental capacity.
Yeah.
Because he leaves, Hermione cried for a week.
Right.
So for an entire week, like, you're mourning this fight and this loss of your friend, of your, like, crush, we'll call it. Like, you're mourning that this fight happened, that they're gone, that you don't know where they are, and you've spent a whole week focusing on that. And we could argue that Ron still was a liability in Godric's Hollow, because if they hadn't spent a whole week being upset and mourning the loss, they could have thought about it. If in the back of their mind they weren't wondering about what they could have done differently with Ron or what's wrong with Ron, maybe they would have noticed more things in Godric's Hollow.
Possibly. I like your thought about just the emotional status of the individuals, because, you know, what does Ron really truthfully add to the trio? I already said the common sense thing.
A good chess game.
A good chess game. But he's a connection to the wizarding world.
Yeah.
So both, Hermione's obviously Muggle-born, and Harry was not in the magical world for 11 years. He's their link to common things in the wizarding world where they will not even consider it. And he's like, hey, wait a minute, this is a thing. So, I mean, there's that. And then, honestly, he does crack a joke. And people overlook the necessity of that.
Yeah.
Where he'll lighten a situation. And it gets overlooked as like, oh, Ron's just being goofy. Well, yeah, he is. And people need that.
But at the same time, he wasn't his usual goofy Ron self.
Not under the locket.
Him leaving.
Correct.
He was so,
Correct.
just downtrodden.
Yeah, and so you also, before him leaving, you don't have any of those, like, oh, Ron would have made a joke about this to lighten them. Like, you don't have that because before him leaving, you just had this vindictive...
They do note long silences between Harry and Hermione where they note that, like, having a third person here just to bounce a conversation off of does help. Like, sometimes it gets a little stale between, like, two people and they're just not... forget the emotional stuff that's tied with the locket and everything else that just happened. Sometimes it's just nice to have a third person's point of view just dot in and dot out. I get the locket is tough, but they even acknowledge that. Being like, wow, it's been silent for like a couple hours. It's a little awkward, So, speaking of awkward, though, Harry and Ron, who have seemed to patch things up just famously, are speeding their way back to the tent, and Hermione gets awoken. And Harry's like, hey, guess what? Guess what happened? Look at who's over here. This is great. And Hermione is like, what is going on? Why is he here? And she moves towards him in a slow, dramatic, silent approach and begins to punch every inch of him that she can possibly get to. She even asks Harry for her wand back so she could presumably curse him.
Good for you, girl.
Harry produces a shield charm between Hermione and Ron, which I actually really, really like the circle of this, of Hermione producing the shield charm between the two boys, and now Harry's having to do it between Hermione and Ron. It's a really nice circle comeback. And look, I'm not going to mince words here. Hermione's a little unhinged at this point. I mean, she is going off on this kid. Hermione says she went after him, begged him to stay, and Ron's like, I'm sorry. I regret it the second I left. I'm sorry. And Hermione's like, that's not good enough. Sorry is not good enough. And Ron yells back, well, what else can I possibly say? And Hermione goes, rack your brains, Ron. That should only take a couple of seconds. You guys could read my notes. My note says, sick burn. Low blow. But my goodness, Hermione, that was a gut punch and a half. Hermione gets so worked up that she gets to the point where Harry assumes only bats could actually hear her shrill voice. You're pro Hermione on this, I'm guessing.
I am. Because also think about it from Hermione's perspective. She is normally so, level-headed and academically focused. And not only did Ron desert them when what they need is numbers, what they need is help, what they need is, the decoy, because we've decided that's Ron's only benefit. But
not exactly what I said, but okay.
But imagine being Hermione and he comes back and he is now the reminder that for a week you cried instead of trying to figure out an answer to this. That he was the reason that you were distracted and couldn't get the puzzles together. She's already feeling all this guilt over what happened in Godric's Hollow, and I'm sure seeing Ron doesn't make it any better. She probably sees Ron and was like, if I didn't have you leaving on my brain, I could have actually thought about this. I could have remembered that one, a hex that I could have used to help, or that charm to get us out of there. I could have been thinking more clearly. Not to mention there's also the, emotional component to it of, he left her. She literally chased him down and begged him to stay. And now he has the gall to come back and go, I'm back. Hugs.
My bad. Yeah.
Sorry. Like, you destroyed who Hermione is. She's a logical thinker, and for, like, however long you were gone, she couldn't think logically. And you did that to her. Now you're going to come back and just go, oh, sorry, girl, we good? No.
I just thought of that quote, like, hell hath no fairy like a woman's story.
Yeah. That is very applicable here.
And I mean, that's so like embarrassing to be like chasing after somebody and begging them not to leave, and then they leave, and then they come back and they're like you said, like, hey girl.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably would have lost it.
Yeah.
So, thinking about my first reactions to all of this, I think initially, my first couple of read-throughs, I was more similarly thinking like Harry and Ron. Like, hey, we just destroyed a horcrux. Like, I saved Harry's life. Like, we're at least getting back.
Yeah,
like,
bro.
We're getting back. I will say, on this read, as again, I am older and I have matured and I've been through some stuff, I think most listeners can probably guess, based on my reaction to Ron leaving, I'm very much in Hermione's camp here. Like, no, you just can't come in like nothing happened. Things happened. Things were said. Actions were taken that you can't take back. It's not just, I'm sorry, we're good. And, like, I get you just saved Harry's life, but even then, we were put in real danger without you here. We struggled without you here. Mm-hmm. We needed you, and you were nowhere to be found. You abandoned us. And I do very much agree with Hermione venting quite shrilly in the direction of Ron. Although, I will say, again, that burn was sick. that was... Whew, okay, Hermione's bringing the heat.
I'm going to make a Disney reference real quick.
Yes!
You just made Julie's...
You know, in Beauty and the Beast, when they're singing when Gaston is singing his song, and he's like, you know, LeFou, I've been thinking, and LeFou is like, the best time I know.
Oh, yeah. Ron gets into the events that he experienced after leaving, and he says he wanted to return as soon as he disapparated, but he immediately ran into snatchers. What are snatchers? They are people that go for gold by turning in Muggleborns or even blood traders, which I will note is an interesting designation now. They're not just going after Muggleborns, they're going after blood traders. So they've expanded their search, their net, their whatever they want to call it. So now, even purebloods or people with strong magical backgrounds have to be careful that they're not associating with Muggles or associating with Muggleborns or whatever have you. So they've expanded. At the start of this Ron explanation, Hermione sits herself down so tightly wrapped up it seemed unlikely she'd unravel for several years.
Hermione is a mood, and I love it. I love that Hermione is essentially like, yes, Ron, please tell us about your hardships.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Please do.
Yep.
Right?
So Ron, to get out of this snatcher situation, said he was Stan Shunpike. And they were like, they believed you were Stan Shunpike? And Ron's like, yeah, they weren't the brightest individuals. And then he half jokes, like, oh, maybe one of them's part troll or something. No laugh. But he was able to regain his wand and steal another, disapparated poorly, and splinched himself again, holding up 2 fingers without fingernails on them. And to this, quote-unquote, hardship, Hermione waspishly recounts the trip to Godric's Hollow and the perils that they have been in, and then comes to the realization of, like, wait. how did you find us? Like, wait a second. Now that she's, like, coming down a little bit from the emotional anger, she's like, wait a second. We do have a real problem here. We try to avoid being found by people we don't want in our camp. How did you get here? Which is a little double-edged sword there of, like, one, you're trying to figure out a problem, which is a real problem, and two, you're definitely calling Ron unwanted in the camp. So, a little waspish there, too.
Listen, he has real hardships now. He lost 2 fingernails.
Fair. It's fair. I can't. It's fair. Those really hurt, Julie. They really hurt. No. Ron, to answer the question, shows the Deluminator. And his explanation is even a little bit more odd, I would say. Maybe a little weird. He says he heard Hermione early Christmas morning via the Deluminator, which was in his pocket at the time. What did she say? She said his name and something about a wand. He clicked it. The light went out in the room. Another light appeared outside the window. He says the light shined similar to a port key. And the light, once he went outside of the room and stood next to the light went inside of Ron. He felt like he knew what he needed to do. He disapparated, and it took him where he needed to go, which is back to them. And they explain the Silver Doe to Hermione. They explain all of those events that just happened earlier in this chapter. Ron passes the wand to Harry. Hermione is not impressed, goes to bed, and turns her back to the room. And Harry and Ron share a moment between them, being like, oh, at least you didn't set the birds on me. And Hermione's like, I haven't quite dismissed that idea just yet. So, it's a little attempted humor by them, and I think, I don't know, do you honestly, like, real question, do you take that comeback by Hermione as an attempt at humor? Like she's contemplating coming back a little bit? Or do you think it's, no, I'm going to curse you?
I think she's coming back a little bit.
I would agree.
I think it's a mix of both. Like, I think Hermione is also sitting there being like, I have my wand back.
Joking warning? A warning joke? A warning joke?
Yeah.
We'll go with a warning joke.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Also, interesting that Dumbledore, like, gave Ron the Deluminator, because that essentially also says that Dumbledore assumed something like this would happen. Which is a little... I mean, we've been insulting Ron this whole episode. But, like, this is also, like... Talk about, like, an insulting gift. Like, hey, I think you're gonna, like, desert your friends and need to find a way back, so let me give you the thing that...
So, I think the idea that, yes, Dumbledore possibly predicted that Ron would want to desert his friends and abandon them in a time of desperation. But I think to spin it with, yes, he would desert, but he would know it was a mistake and want to redeem himself. Which doesn't... I get... Julie's looking at me like she's staring daggers, like she's going to send birds flying after me. And then I know.
I haven't ruled it out yet, Dan.
I know. But there is a clear distinction. If someone deserts and abandons, and they are gone, that is a certain type of human being. And then there's the one that comes back, says, I was wrong, I'm sorry, I want to make up for this. That is another type of human being, and they are two very different people. So there is a delineation there. I get that might not excuse Ron, and I am certainly not excusing Ron. But I'm just saying there is a difference there between those individuals and their intentions.
Fair. I also like the almost metaphor of the Deluminator. Obviously deals with light, and it uses light to bring Ron back to his friends, which the metaphor would then be that the friends are like the light of his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it.
I can be positive sometimes.
There you go.
My thought, too, is, take away the all-knowingness of Dumbledore. Maybe he just gave them the Deluminator in case somebody got lost or,
Oh, like literally, he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't bank on Ron deserting. He was just like,
Right.
if someone gets disconnected,
Right.
if someone gets kidnapped,
He thought Ron.
Right.
Either way, he's saying nothing good for Ron. Either he knew he was going to desert him, or he was like, yeah, you're going to get kidnapped or lost. You're going to need this.
you know, I was about to defend and be like, you know, maybe he just gave Ron the Deluminator to not leave him out in the will and just give all three of them. That's not exactly great for Ron either.
I needed to give him something. How about a nice pair of socks?
Look,
Woolen socks.
I know they're going to be together. It'd be rude not to give him a gift. I gotta get him something. No, speaking of Dumbledore and all this, and I know we're running long and we got to wrap this up, but just the magic of the Deluminator. Forget the intent behind the gift. Just the sheer magic of it is prodigious. I mean, not even just the actual magic of it, the creativity behind it is next level.
Yeah. It also makes me wonder if, like, the way that it's used by Ron is actually the intended purpose of it. But, like, if, you know, taking the light out of an area and putting it back was just, like, a little, like, added feature by Dumbledore. Like, he was like, wouldn't it be cool if it just took in all the light? And then he's like, well, this is a handy little gadget. But, like, that wasn't the intended, like, original use of it. That feels very Dumbledore to me.
Yeah.
I like Dumbledore just getting, like, random objects at a thrift shop. Like, not even a magical thrift shop. Like, a regular Muggle thrift shop. And
A rubber ducky.
Yeah! I'd just be like, oh, I could do something with that. Like, I could make that work.
It squeaks.
Amazing.
Like, him and Arthur, I think, would just go to town on a Muggle thrift shop. But anyway, maybe that's how they bonded. Like, their first Order of the Phoenix outing, they're just like, hey, you want to just go into the shop real quick? Okay.
They could have made a lot of money as seen on TV.
Works like magic. That's our new tinfoil hat theory.
Yes.
All of the as seen on TV that says works like magic is
Actual magic?
Yeah, it's actually wizards amongst us.
Yep. I like it.
Well, that throws whole new perspective on the ShamWow and the shake weight.
The shake weight.
You know,
okay, Arthur Weasley would love a chia pet, though, guys.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A Tamagotchi. He would think it's like an actual thing locked inside of a... You know, I had visions of where this discussion was going to go. Shake weights were not it. But I hope we've clearly been entertained by this conversation, and I hope you at home, at work, wherever, have also been entertained by this episode. Let us know what you think on all of our ideas, all of our conversations, all of our thoughts, Julie's hatred of Ron. Comment on Spotify, comment on all of our socials, which now includes YouTube and Blue Sky. You can find most of our socials at HogwartsAPod. We love to hear from you. We love to get all of your thoughts, debate some of your thoughts, talk amongst ourselves about those thoughts. So we really appreciate all of that interaction. We will see you next week for Chapter 20. Thanks for listening.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.